Welcome everyone to our virtual workshop, Progress, Insights, and New AI Methods and Policy Impact being created by the Australian Urban Observatory Digital Livability Indicators System. This session is part of the Practice Perspectives, Local and Regional Indicators for Community Wellbeing series, an initiative of the newly unified ISQOLS CIC Organizing Committee. Through this series, we highlight applied real-world projects that connect local community indicators with global quality of life research. The Australian Urban Observatory is a digital platform tracking neighbourhood livability across Australia's 21 largest cities, co-designed with policymakers since 2020. This presentation will highlight its indicator system, AI-driven innovations, and how the evidence supports healthier urban policy and planning. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Melanie Davern is a professor of public health and urban planning at RMIT University and the director of the Australian Urban Observatory, a digital livability planning platform that translates research into policy and practice at local, national, and international levels. She is also a member of the UN Habitat Global Urban Observatories Network. Her research focuses on the intersection of public health and urban planning, livability, and emphasizes collaborative practice-oriented research to reduce health inequalities and improve social, economic, and environmental outcomes. Professor Davern, it is a great pleasure to have you today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jill, for the very kind introduction, and I've definitely made you work with using such a long intro. But thank you for the opportunity. It's brilliant to be able to support ISQOLS at any point, one of my favorite organizations in the world who has been doing great things for many years, and to support the extension now from the Community Indicators Consortium being supported by your great work, Jill. It's brilliant. So I'm going to talk today for about half an hour about the Australian Urban Observatory and just provide you with an overview and some of the work that we're doing. If anyone listening has any queries or questions, I do provide details towards the end. And as Jill said, we have the Slack opportunity to talk further post this presentation as well. So I hope you find this interesting and a very different presentation, perhaps from some of the others, which is really to demonstrate the richness of the work that we all do in the community indicator space. And I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. So I am sitting in Melbourne, Australia, and at our university, we find it very important to acknowledge that where we sit and meet according to our Indigenous First Nations people. And so I'd like to begin by starting with some local language, which is the word of Womanjika, which means to come with purpose to this meeting, and to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. The AUO importantly acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and gratefully acknowledges their connection and care of the land, sea and community. Very important when we're talking about community and the different perspectives that we bring from our different backgrounds and our different countries and cultures as well. So to begin with, I'm going to go through just to give you a little overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction of the Australian Urban Observatory and how we came to be. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the technology that we're using. And as you're all very aware, technology is rapidly changing, which is, I think, brilliant for the work that we do and the future applications that it can have. Then I'll talk more about how we're being used in policy, our work, and also in terms of research application, and really the joining between these two aspects. So our work comes from an academic institution, It's hosted, like many community indicator initiatives, can be at a university or an independent institution, often in community organisations, where ours comes from a particular university, RMIT, in Melbourne. And then I will talk about future applications and where we're heading with some of our research and the work that will come through into the AUO. So just to begin with, the introduction to the AUO, where did we start? Well, this work actually started long before the conception of the Australian Urban Observatory, and I would like to acknowledge that many of the learnings came from Community Indicators Victoria, a very an important project that we held back when I was based at the University of Melbourne that was very bottom up. And I acknowledge contributors and developers of that project, such as Mike Salvaris back then, who really led the development of a framework of community wellbeing that I then joined the team, and we really made that happen, turned it into reality through the use of both subjective and objective indicators of community wellbeing. Doing that work was important because we also learned of the many limitations that came from it. And one of those things really was that in understanding community well-being, we wanted to understand this connection between place and health. And in terms of the work that we did with place and health, we also learnt very quickly that we needed to understand details of place and health. And in terms of community wellbeing, this comes down to what we would call in public health the social determinants of health, because we know that where you are born, where you live, where you learn, where you work, where you play, where you age, that local environment is a very important determinant of long-term health outcomes. But those health outcomes are also influenced by the policies that are being decided by those around you, both in local, state, and federal government. And at the time, I think that some of that knowledge was really building in terms of academic knowledge and the link between place and health. And over that time, we have really established a huge literature that shows the importance and the connection between things like where people are living, where they're able to access transport, food, public spaces, all of these things that people may not think of as health. So I think it's really important through the work that we do and through community indicators that we really were able to identify that there were inequities in terms of the way places are planned and the connection to those planning decisions and how they are influencing these social determinants of health. So government decision making in that point really is not just about transport's not just about the provision of transport, but transport is about the provision of public health and the promotion of public health. So through that work, we could really see that these things were having huge impact and really important, and a different conversation to where health planning and to where urban planning had been back years before, and drawing in this connection between intersectoral planning and thinking about, well, what are these places that we're creating and how are they influencing the long-term health outcomes of people? So it wasn't about just telling people you should be healthier or you should move more or you should eat better, but thinking about, well, how are we designing a place that's actually taking some of those decisions away from people? Really taking some of the freedoms or capabilities that they have to live a good life through policymaking and urban planning. And people previously often think, and still now often think about health as being, if we're going to work on public health, we'll work on providing hospitals and doctors. But we think less about, well, how can we think about planning an environment that's actually going to promote health or prevent the occurrence of disease? So if we have people moving and being active, we're less likely to have obesity. If we're less likely to have obesity, we're less likely to have non-communicable disease like cardiovascular disease, like diabetes types 2. So really we have to think more, and you can see this diagram on the right-hand side, thinking about how do we design and build a city that's actually going to prevent illness, it's going to promote health, rather than just reacting with the delivery of services that are designed to treat people once they're ill. We want to stop people getting ill before we do that. So this is actually about a conversation about, yes, these factors where people live, they're really important to health, but also they're influenced by policy and decision making. And if we can do this better, we can stop and prevent the need for more hospitals and help keep more people healthier for longer. One of the other really important factors that goes with this is that we know there's a social gradient in health, so that people living in more disadvantaged conditions, which can be areas that have less access to services, less access to great transport or spaces that allow them to be healthy, that we know that there's a disadvantage factor that comes with health. So we want to make sure that we're also addressing equity in this decision making as well, so that if we're creating places that promote health, we're doing them for everyone and not just people who are able to afford to live in places that provide good living conditions. That really is the driver. This is the decision making behind the AUO and what we're trying to achieve. We're really trying to make sure that people have the ability to understand where they live, but also to influence the policy making, particularly around urban planning, to create better places for everyone to live in good conditions that are going to promote health and well-being, which also happen to be very sustainable places at the same time. So just to move forward. Come on. Oh, sorry. So before I continue, I just want to go back. So around this time, we were also thinking a lot about what is well-being, what is livability. And this is back to a period now over a decade ago, around 2012, where we brought together all this understanding about built environments, natural environments, health and well-being. And at this same time, there was a lot of publicity about livable cities. So people were really jumping onto this concept, but we wanted to really understand what is a livable city. And interestingly, it really connects to a framework of well-being if you think about it through a different lens. But for us, we were looking through the lens of the social determinants of health. And we're trying to understand, what does livability look like? So this took a review both of academic literature and of grey literature, where we came up with the definition in front of you, where a livable place is one that has to be safe, socially cohesive and inclusive. But it's about having good services nearby that are linked via public transport, active transport. It's about the local shops. It's about health and community services. It's about leisure and culture. It's about education, employment. It's really about being able to live locally. So this definition of livability was really central to what we were doing. And we wanted to make sure that we could think about, yes, if we were going to understand these concepts, but how do we measure it? How do we monitor it? How do we make sure that we're actually achieving livability? And livability in local areas. Because if you look at a broad city approach, you're not really going to understand those social determinants of health and how they're impacting on people in their everyday life. So really important to think about local livability when it comes to this definition as well. This definition is really important to us because it is one of those driving forces or the foundation behind the Australian Observatory before we actually developed it. So we knew what we wanted to do. We knew this was an important way of conceiving and defining livability. But the important part and the difficult part with this is it's easy to theorize, but how do we really, pardon me, turn this into something that is measurable, it's monitored, you can understand it, you can conceive, you can see it, you can understand it. So that's where we took to the development of the Australian Urban Observatory. So for the AUO, we also wanted to tap into this power of policy. And we understand, and this is actually a world report on the social determinants of health equity released last year in 2025, because that understanding of the social determinants of health actually came through the great work of Michael Marmot, and looked at originally it was an investigation into what are the social determinants of health, how is local policy, national policy important in this. And that was many years ago, but now in 2025, we've seen this kind of re-emergence of the importance of these social determinants of health. And it really connects into these key factors that I've brought up, that you can see this link between community indicators about quality of life, about policy, and about the power of local government. So we are seeing the encouragement of local governments to actually address health equity because they have an important role in doing so, but also in terms of engagement with society. So my interest with indicators many years ago came through that connection of, one, accountability in terms of good public policy and decision making, but really importantly, it was engaging. It is about a democratic process of engaging the community in developing that process and progress that a country has. So if we're not going to talk to our people, if we're not going to learn from our people who are living in conditions, who are experiencing some of these things, who are contributing, have some limited amount of ownership in the development of local and state national policies, then we're talking about autocratic process and not democratic process. We really want people engaged in that process of policy making, but we need to do it with evidence, and we need to do it to understand what works, what doesn't work, and maybe what needs to be tweaked to make for better outcomes in the future as well. So then this led to the development of the Australian Urban Observatory, and I will show you some more information of what it might look like later on. But we really took that definition of livability, we're connecting it within this context of policy, within planning, and taking that long definition and now operationalizing or measuring that. So we've been able to take that definition and turn it into what we would say 9 key domains of place, and then a 10th domain of people or demographics, and really measuring this at a very, very local level. And we've done it down to census tract across our 21 largest cities in Australia, across 40,000 neighbourhoods. And what we're able to do through that is to really look at specific aspects of these key domains of livability, walkability, social infrastructure, public open space, employment, housing, also thinking about the people who live there, and connecting this information that comes back to our research knowledge that came between the connection between people, place, and health. And then looking at those design factors, developing indicators that reflect that knowledge, and then sharing that knowledge through a digital platform that we are making sure that, and really working with policymakers to make that available to them, but also the public. So this is a resource that's made available to people to use, and we're ensuring that we have long-term sustainability through partnership with our policymakers as well. So we're actually doing this across 3 time periods now. So we launched in 2020 and we measured for 2018, then again 3 years later in 2021, then again 3 years later in 2024. So we're creating this longitudinal measurement system, looking at how livability is changing down to that detailed neighbourhood level in these cities across Australia, so we can see where livability's improvement is occurring, but also where future investment should go to enhance or improve livability in different areas, to really help with prioritisation of planning and identify areas of inequity, so that if we can see that there's an area that's doing particularly badly or really need some help to lift the livability for those people, we know by lifting that livability, we're also going to improve the health outcomes for that population who live there as well. But it's really important in terms of evaluation and seeing that change over time. So yes, we really developed this digital livability planning platform. And that platform itself was not just something that we sat down and thought about. We worked closely with partners in policy to understand their needs, to design the interface itself. So we have used open source programming and software to really make sure that we were developing something that was addressing the needs of policymakers rather than this was something we thought was good and then we were going to take it out and hope that people used it. It's also drawing on a lot of that earlier information and knowledge and practice knowledge really that came through Community Indicators Victoria, where we identified there are a number of gaps that people were looking for more detailed data, that relying on administrative data sources placed us at risk, particularly in terms of political cycles, whereas if we could address that and really do smaller level, more detailed data provision, it was really going to help people to understand where are the gaps in terms of livability, and also to draw on the knowledge of, well, what's important to a policymaker? Because as academics, we're really not taught to sort of take on that political empathy or a policymaker or a practitioner's perspective into our research. But if we want research to be valuable, one, we have to share it, but most importantly, we have to co-produce it. We have to understand what are the problems in practice that we need to take on as researchers that can make our research really valuable. And sometimes that might be a tweak to a research question you've already got, or it might be a whole new area of investigation. But for research, policy, and practice to work really well together, I believe that's the essential aspect. And you will hear through all of the work that comes through community indicators that partnership and knowledge of working together is really critical to, I believe, all of our great work. So what we've done really is translated a whole literature of academic knowledge that comes into these livability indicators that have been shared out to the policy and practice world. You can see that small map in the corner, and really just to show you the spread of the countries that we're looking at. The cities within our country, these 21 largest cities are home to 80% of our population, with Australia's population really across the east coast of the country. But in these major capital cities and across the east coast is where 80% of our country lives. So although we have this huge sparse country, we also have a lot of people who are just living in our cities. So not to say that we can't do this with other cities, small cities and smaller areas of Australia. We've done it previously with tiny towns across Australia. Populations down to 500 people, where we're taking some of the technology that we're using and really bringing it in to make sure that it's relevant and it's measuring and monitoring these particular livability issues right down to that neighbourhood level. Why indicators? And I think I have spoken about this already earlier, but I describe indicators as icebergs. They really describe the tip of the iceberg. So we know there are issues that may be happening in communities, but if we flood people with data, if we give them really complex information, it can be completely overwhelming and then it doesn't get used. But if we can take aggregated information that's really informed through deep thinking, through theory, through research, but make it really easy to understand, then we're providing information that's really going to provide a lead, I guess, that tip of the iceberg, which is saying there's something going on here. What's happening? Is it something that's positive? Is it something that's negative? It's not going to tell you everything. It doesn't tell you perhaps why this problem is occurring. It's not going to provide you with a complete solution in terms of intervention. But in talking to people, you're really going to understand that local knowledge. And I would see this as a real marriage between one, what is the situation that an indicator is identifying, and then the marriage of understanding, well, what's happening? And that's where community is really important. So this idea of using indicators is really to support that link back into talking to community. So we see them as a tool, as a conversation starter, and they've been devised based on knowledge, but really to support participatory democracy, advocacy, and stakeholder engagement. So obviously within government that there may be areas or portfolios that some governments can control and other governments have responsibility for. So still, this idea of showing that there's an issue, identifying that issue is critical. Identifying change in an issue is also critical. But we really want to use them to highlight what's going on and to make sure that people are having conversations to understand that. For us, we're using geographical systems, GIS, spatial analysis, and so on, because we can see that that's a really important tool for identifying issues related to place. So as GIS and GeoAI develops, it's becoming our friend in really trying to understand more issues that we had an inability to address earlier. If we're only relying on subjective information, we're relying on people's opinions. That's really important. But what's the objective situation at the same time? It's really easy to have noisy members of the community, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. But what happens to the people who aren't sort of speaking up or aren't talking about what's happening in their community? Objective indicators play a really important role for identifying these kinds of issues too. All of the indicators included in the AUO also link to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is really important. We are working towards the 2030 agenda, but everything that we're doing is linked back to these, with obviously a number going to the sustainable cities and communities and to good health and well-being within our work. But personally, I've asked people this and they might think I'm a bit crazy, but my favorite goal, what's your favorite goal? There's a question for the QA. What's your favorite goal? Mine is partnerships for the goals. And if you look in there, you specifically see it is about working together for the achievement of these goals. And it's working across sectors. It's thinking about measurement and monitoring and the importance of the role of indicators that come into this 2030 agenda too. So who are we? I just wanted to acknowledge the team that I work with here. It's really important. It's not just me. I'm part of many. And all of us work across a range of different projects, different interests, research interests, different academic interests, different backgrounds, whether it be from computer science, psychology, urban planning, public health, architecture. This is computer science and AI. This is really, really, really important for us. So there's a team of us who come together and we're really working together in terms of the development of new indicators, the refinement of our platform that we use to share the indicators we have available. But again, each of us reaching out and being engaged with industry and policymakers to make sure that we're bringing the problems into our work so we can create new indicators that are also of value to the audience that we're working with as well. How do we do the work we do in the AUO? So this is really about that research knowledge combined with the processes of both geospatial processing, AI processing, identifying point locations, creating new data sets ourselves. So one of the learnings from Community Indicators Victoria was that if we rely on other people to give us data, we often lost data or data would stop. It was politically unpalatable. So then no one would share it with you. Whereas if we created our own data sets, no one could take them away from us. And that's really what we did. So we've concentrated on objective measurement up to now and really developing processes and spatial processes and computer science processes that have allowed us to more efficiently and effectively measure detailed information. So we may look, where is a house located? And then where is the access to particular services? What do those distances look like? What does the service look like? What's the quality? What's the frequency of that service? And then create our own data to look at the distribution of these services in understanding the livability of that area. An example, and this is taken from our data visualization portal. So there's a map portal you go into once you join into the AUO, and then we take an indicator like the livability index, and then we show it visually. And I think this is one of the key aspects that are really important for a policymaker who's not got time, who's under the pump, somebody's asking for a decision tomorrow, they need to move on to the next progress, they need to provide a political brief, whatever it may be. But they haven't got time to go through thousands of data sets. They just need to see quickly, right, what's this issue? What does it look like? How can I share this information? And this example is really at that census tract level, looking at the livability of Sydney using an overarching livability index. We also put the result into context in terms of that particular city or in terms of a local government or municipal area or in terms of assessment according to all of the available neighbourhoods across Australia. What does that result rank like? So we try and do it in an easy, quick, very informative, but easy to take in translation of this complex knowledge that's happened behind it. So we start with all this processing and then it ends up in a map like this so that someone can very quickly see, right, that area is doing well, this one's not. And as you expect, green is good, pink is bad, or red is bad. And so very easy for people to suddenly get a quick vision of what does it look like. Another example, I'm going back to Melbourne to show. So when I was working with indicators many years before with Community Indicators Victoria, we used to only get regional or municipal level results. And if you look at a city, in all of the Australian cities that we measure, the inner area, the most established area does very well. The older areas, or sorry, the newer growth areas that are lacking service provision, they tend to not do so well. And so you have this picture of good livability in the centre of areas of cities, and then poorer livability as you move out. But what happens is when you break this down into different geographies, you start to see change. And this is really just to demonstrate the value of the work. If you go down to suburb level, suddenly you start to see a green picture, and you can see that not all of the outer areas are doing badly, and not all of the inner areas are doing really well. So you start to see the variation. But as you get down to census tract, this is where it's actually really useful for someone who's using it for planning. You can go in there and have a look at those details. So a very different picture from that broad brush kind of, are we the most livable city or are we not? No, we're not interested really in the comparison of one city versus another. We're interested in the intercity, that area within a city, and thinking about the location of how do we make every neighborhood more livable, more health promoting, more sustainable for all of the neighborhoods across the country, not just that comparative version. In terms of technology and what we're using, so obviously, really important for engagement work. But also we're trying to work on both the platform itself and devise new features within our platform, remembering it's all open source, all completely customized, all uniquely developed by the needs of policymakers and what we can do. Taking that information and then bringing in what are these policymakers telling us? What are our partners saying? What we'd really like to understand is, and trying to bring in new features. And on the map, you can see we even have a walkability feature. So you can put a point on any of the maps that we have, and then understand, well, if I lived here, how far can I get with a 10-minute walk? How far with a 15-minute walk? How far with a 20-minute walk? And this really is tapping into policy directions towards, the 10-minute, the 5-minute, the 15-minute, the 20-minute, 30-minute city. And very important for policy, because if you go back to that accountability need, that it's very easy to create a motherhood statement of, we're going to create a city that's a 5-minute city. That's great, but 5-minute city for who? Is it only in a particular area? Is it only for a particular group of people who live in a particular area? And these kind of tools have been developed so that people can actually see, well, what's happening in a particular area, and is this happening across the city or only in select areas? If we're going to create an intervention, where should we be putting our effort? Where should we be investing our public funds that's going to create a more equitable and livable city for all? Finally, some geospatial science and AI. I can see that obviously we've been working for a number of years now and trying to refine different ways of measuring the built environment in particular. So canopy cover, the shade provided by trees, is obviously a more and more important factor as climate change is occurring. And we know that all of our partners are looking for this. And at the moment, it's nearly completely unaffordable. It's taking up huge government resource in terms of the use and creation of urban shade models and paying for that from private providers. So we're trying to make that accessible to all. And we're looking at the shade provided by trees, both in public and private spaces, which we know are really important for both mental health and for physical health. And look at new ways of devising how you could take imagery and then turn that into new measures that will identify areas of shade, areas of heat vulnerability, and then identify this using different models. And for us, canopy cover is about to be released. We will do later this year, and we're going to make that available for all. But I just want to reinforce the complexity and the difficulty that comes with that, because this is a problem we've been working on for about 18 months. But we are seeing huge progression in terms of access to data, even sources like Omniverse that are coming out, new resources. The technology is really rapidly changing. So we're really, taking that on. We're working with it. We're looking at new ways of measuring and monitoring across large scale areas. Remembering we've got 40,000 neighbourhoods. It's not just one council. It's not just one government. We've got, 8 different governments, state level. We've got a federal government. We've got over 179 local or municipal governments that we're working with. So we need large scale data sets, but we also need scalability in terms of these new technical models that we're bringing on. One of the things we've also been working on, and for the last couple of years, is the provision of cycling infrastructure. Now, some of the audience may be listening to this and thinking, well, surely you all have access to this. Data provision and resources dedicated to the creation of data sets are very limited in our country. So we spend something like 95% of our time really creating the data sets before we're able to create indicators, and that smallest amount of effort is what's gone in when you just see it being delivered. It's really the work that's happening behind the scenes that creates very valuable and new community assets in terms of the provision of cycling infrastructure. Where is it? Is it across our cities? Is it only in some parts of our cities? Is it in areas that are completely intersecting with cars? Is it in What's considered cycling infrastructure in one area? Is that actually a bike lane that's only 50 centimetres wide? Is there no bike lane at all? Is it a separated bike lane? So these are the kind of research issues that we deal with in creating an indicator before we make it available. But these, AI and visualization, computer vision changes are making it much easier for us to produce it. It just takes a lot of work to get the model that's accurate enough to produce a final indicator and release it. But I see this is going to become more and more our friend over time, even things like air quality measurement and so on. These have been really hard to do because of the limited monitoring that occurs in our country. But now that scalable impact is really going to come in with this increased GeoAI and AI models and new data sets that are available. Oh, sorry. So finally, some scorecards. I'm just going to show you some policy application here, noting the time, 8:44, just to allow for some discussion time later on. So we also do city scorecards because people are very interested. So we do these at different levels, and we've created overarching city scorecards based on our livability results because they're important still at a policy level, despite our interest in changing the intra-city livability. There's much interest at a government level talking about which cities doing better or worse and change over time. And then we do them, say, for growth areas, just looking at the difference between our growth areas, our sprawling greenfield areas versus the inner city areas. Or we can do them for a whole council area and look at what's that overarching municipality livability score look like and what are the suburb differences within that municipality. So they're very well received and they've been developed over time with input from our policy partners as well. In terms of tools, we do have a transport health assessment tool that looks and really both for Brisbane and for Melbourne. And the Brisbane model monitorizes both changes from private vehicle use into active transport modes using short local trips. And it shows the health benefits that come, but then the cost that can be quantifiable from those changes to active transport in a local area, and tries to provide some incentives as to showing government why it is beneficial to try and support more active transport at a local level for those short trips as well. We have guidance notes that we've developed with our policy partners, and we've also developed teaching resources to really work with students, and very important in terms of the livability research that we do, because livability is part of the geography curriculum here in Australia. So as a resource, we're really trying to make it available for students for public good as well, to show them how they could investigate their local areas and connect that back to curriculum development through Geography Teachers Association. Also, in terms of policy application, we work at all of these different levels: local, state, local health districts, which are multi-municipalities. Federally, with the Federal Department of Infrastructure, we have been working for a number of years, and with developers. So we partner closely with Stockland, who are the largest private developer in the country, particularly in terms of social infrastructure provision, and really trying to help them to understand both the concept of livability, the way that we define it and understand it, but also in terms of applications for them to make improvements in the way that they're doing things, and to really show that partnership and how it's creating community good through their work. Finally, I just wanted to show you another tool, and this really comes to that pracademic maybe lens that I like to bring to the work. So we know a lot about these influences of livability and health, and we developed and released this tool last year that was funded by the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation here, to try and provide people in planning environments to understand about the concept of livability and how they might be able to do that across the planning cycle more effectively. Because we often find in planning, particularly health and social planning, that it may be that there's a first year plan developed and we have a 4-year planning cycle here in Victoria, like many of our states. The first year a plan's developed and it's all exciting, and then everyone forgets it. And then there's a 4th year where there's a new plan developed. But often those middle years of trying to make that planning cycle really effective are lost because of resourcing, because of busyness, because of what the limited resources that people may have in local government. But this resource was designed to try and help to increase that intersectoral policy work across councils, across government, and really produce both tools and resources in terms of, well, if I'm going to work with someone in, say, an engineer in a transport department that has no understanding of any of the work that I do, how can I provide them with some information? So again, we worked with partners to develop this, and we were able to produce both a number of tools and also a number of resources to work with government officials, with councillors, with those elected officials who maybe have no planning, public health, or community development background, but they're wanting to understand about some of these key concepts. So there's a number of tools that are available. This is available on our website so that anyone can use it. And would encourage people, because even though it was developed for Victoria, really these tools are really important for use in multiple places. So that could be about factors like we've really drawn on the AUO in this work, looking at 2 key examples of walkability assessment and planning and public open space assessment and planning. But then things like annual reflection workshops for planning, thinking about start, stop, change. What should we be doing differently? How could we change this policy making along the way? Finally, a health in all policies checklist, which is really great for starting those conversations about how integrated is our work. Resources, there's a number of resources that even talk about why is livability important? Why are the social determinants of health important? Why should I care about health and wellbeing planning? This is really, really important. Or how can I use a tool like the Australian Urban Observatory as an evidence piece to my work? Different ways of thinking about this too, so that, again, this is about that ability to have an empathy from a practitioner's point of view, rather than this is what my research has done. This is about maybe coming in here from a planning perspective and thinking, well, actually, I'm looking for a tool that does this, rather than having to go through all the tools or through all the resources and find what's useful. So to try and really encourage people to think about things from a different end. One example from that toolkit, this is the, livability resource. Livability connects urban planning to public health. What is it? Why should I care? And this sort of resource has been designed so that somebody can print it off and then take it over to an elected official and say, this is what this is about. This is why we're trying to do this work. I'm trying to share this information so you could see maybe your role, maybe to a traffic engineer who's never thought about this as being important. Okay, I can see you, Joe, so I'm going to wind up. I'm taking the hint. Final tool there as well to have a look at. And again, there's a QR code that will take you to this tool on our website. Future, what are we doing? I've talked about this a little bit. I think one of the key things we're really going to invest in this year is looking at subjective measurement and bringing that into the AUO so we can link objective and subjective, and future modelling. How do we plan for interventions to show how it will change future livability in our work? And I'll stop there, Joe. Thank you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch, as mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Well, time for Q&A. Susan, you want to chime in? You're muted.
Sorry, I should know better by now. I wanted to say how beautiful all of the sharing and the visuals were. It's incredible that you can get down and connect to neighborhoods, all the way up to policy at every single level. Anything you want to talk about in terms of that toolkit of yours? Because that was outstanding.
Yeah, I think with that toolkit, I would love for people to use it. Like, I really do think there's so much, it's really international, even though it was designed for a Victorian application here in Australia, these are the challenges that people have all over the world. How do we talk to people who from a different perspective, really, right? So it's just trying to start conversations with colleagues, with people in different places that may think differently to us.
Beautiful. Joe, what about you?
Well, I found her presentation to be really fascinating. And as a matter of fact, her project down in Australia is certainly a best case model that a lot of people in the community indicators projects can emulate, can use it as a model to do their own thing. What I find fascinating is how the whole field of community indicators projects has sort of evolved over the years. People approach community indicators from different perspective, and in the context of what Melanie has been talking about, she's been approaching it from a public health perspective. But I see how different lens can be applied from a public health perspective, from an economics perspective, from a sustainability or what you call environmental well-being perspective. Let's say, for example, sustainability. Many people, many scholars as well as practitioners who are very much involved in this whole business of environmental well-being, they realize that at least at the community level, you can't really focus on environmental well-being and develop indicators of environmental well-being without taking into account economic indicators, without taking into account equity types of indicators. As a matter of fact, there's a whole movement we call the three E's, meaning environment, equity, and economics, and how, in essence, those different types of indicators help you develop a much more comprehensive set of indicators at the community level. But nevertheless, this approach has been sort of driven from a specific lens, and that is an environmental well-being lens. And what Melanie's been doing is, doing it exactly the same thing, but from a public health perspective, where she talks about livability and walkability and open spaces, and all of these things are so important to mitigate, let's say, something like disease prevention. So this is fantastic. The same thing, if you look at people who are involved in happiness economics, they approach this whole business from an economic well-being, and then that finally they realize, hey, at the community level, you have to take into account social indicators, you have to take into account subjective well-being, and so forth. I find this to be very fascinating. But this is an observation. I have a question for you, Melanie. And the question is, much of what we're doing in public health is very much related to, the ultimate goal is disease prevention, right? So again, develop the infrastructure related to walkability and open spaces. All of these things are very much related to making sure that people are healthy. But then there is a sort of a movement within quality of life that really focus on flourishing first. So you're not just focusing on basic needs as in health and safety, but you want people to flourish. And we're realizing that aspects related to flourishing is very much also related to health and safety. If you try and get people to be involved in, for example, physical fitness, in recreational sports, in cultural activities and leisure types of activities that has a sort of a health component that can go way beyond disease prevention. Of course, it will do disease prevention, but from a motivational perspective, it does more in the sense that it creates those foundations that are much more sustainable at the community level. So my question to you is that, have you been incorporating aspects related to flourishing?
Wow, great question, Joe, because these are the sorts of things I want to take this year. I really like, we have spent so much time. 2017, I started the AUO, and then 2020 we launched. So we've been working now up until 2026 just to establish ourselves. So we've got all these objective measures, but we're not being able to do that. And as you will know, my heart goes back to subjective well-being, right? So I'm interested in mental health. I am interested in people's personal well-being as well. So the next thing is I want to bring in, and I'm really interested in this, the subjective measurement. So asking people about place, asking people about the importance of different factors. And there is a concept, and I have been trying to speak to her, of this neighborhood love, Do I love where I live? I think personally, I hypothesize that we have to love something about our neighborhoods, or it's just we have an inability to sustain our well-being. So we've got to find something positive in it. But what about this idea of what is it that makes for a great place that matches these metrics that we know say that well-being should be determined by these things? How much of it is an individual perspective? How much of it is collective information that is decided by people? So we're going to bring in participatory GIS measures and so on to look at location and some of these concepts later this year.
Wonderful, wonderful.
If anyone has ideas or wants to share anything on these, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. If you have questions, raise your hand or just interject whenever you can, or maybe you can write your observation or comments or questions in the chat room. So feel free to do that.
We have a question from Alistair.
Garrett, hi there. Yes, hi, my name's Alistair Ramsden. I work for Stats New Zealand mainly on census methodology things, and we have being census, many of our customers are involved in the same kind of work that you're dealing with. So, but I'm interested in your use of AI, and particularly recently, Boston University School of Law professors Hartzog and Sibley have published a paper describing how AI destroys institutions. So I wanted to know more about how your AI use potentially affects civic institutions. So they're thinking about things like the rule of law, academic universities, a free press, that kind of thing.
That's a very big question, Alistair, for the end of a session. So many things to say in this. Look, obviously there are things that could raise real concern, and I can appreciate that. My approach is let's embrace the things that we have some knowledge and control over. So more in terms of using AI as a tool and not using AI as a brain, if that makes sense to you. So for us, definitely, in terms of segmentation, computer vision and things like this is really useful AI development, but it's also making sure that you know what you're doing. And, I am not an AI expert, but I work with people in my team who are, and colleagues who are. So I need people who can tell me that's rubbish or what's in the black box. So to me, it's knowing how you're using it and using it in an appropriate way, but definitely not letting it think for you. That's probably the shortest answer I can give on such a big issue. And I have to say, We love Stats New Zealand. You do great work and thank you for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. The reason I'm asking is I'm involved in a high-level group for modernisation of statistics. It's a UN. I don't know if you would, the word. It's not really a Quango, but it's a subsidiary group. And one of the projects that I'm working on is how do we use AI responsibly in national statistical organisations. So this was just. I saw the blurb for your talk, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go and ask this person about how their work with AI is challenging.
Yeah, but Joe, I'm also thinking the work through the UN here, that might be connected to Alistair, may be useful.
Yeah,
Yes.
the person the leader of that project is called Rita Piello. She's from Stats Finland.
I haven't met her. Have you, Joe?
Okay,
No, not really.
sure. I think also Gary Dunnett, who's a Stats New Zealand person, who's currently the president of the International Association for Official Statistics, I think it's called. Anyway, he's involved as well. But the world's a big place.
Yeah,
is.
Susan, I'm just
Absolutely.
thinking of your colleague too from Israel.
Right, Anat.
Anat.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, she mentioned that in her talk in Luxembourg as well, just very briefly.
Ah,
Anyone else have any other questions or comments? Frank, we saw you coming in. We didn't know if you had something or.
I did. Yeah, I'm always impressed when I hear Melanie speaking, and always want to hear more. I was curious about the cost of the infrastructure of doing this work, and what is the biggest hurdle, the thing that maybe would keep you up at night about this project? What's the hardest part to, continue to resource and continue or maybe to keep going? Maybe it's partnerships that are hard to maintain. What's the hardest part for people who wanted to kind of follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I think you know too well, too, Frank, the difficulty of community indicator initiatives of any sort are really the sustainability issue. So for us, we have taken on this partnerships idea. So we kind of have like a freemium model. Well, of course, anyone who does this work wants it to be available to everyone, to anyone, and everyone to use it. Now, that's well and good if we didn't live in a capitalist society where if you don't have any income, then you don't survive, you're not here. So we do ask for some payment from our partners as minimal a level as we could ask that keeps us going and keeps them going. So that is a real challenge for me. And the real reason and the only reason we do it is that we can invest in salaries. We just need to be able to pay people to be able to do the work to keep it going. So that was a huge learning, is somehow philosophically it doesn't gel, but it's a forced choice to be sustainable long term. And the way I can deal with that is that I think we create more benefit by going this way and being there over a longer period of time. And that maybe is creating a community benefit that comes from the work, but it places you in a very strange place when you've not designed something for that purpose. But I think it's critical. Like there's no point in saying we're just going to be here, we're going to do great work and not think long term. Like any project like this needs to be thinking long term as it starts, not to establish itself and then think, now what now? It is a real challenge, and always, academia, I say it's being self-employed within a university. It's not what it was, and it's not this idea of wearing nice elbow patches and sitting in a nice room for a long period of time anymore. It's brutal. So, we really, sometimes I'm like, I'd get a desk and that's it. We don't even get computers paid for anymore. So all of this work we have to pay for ourselves, and it's a lot. It's a huge part of it. It's like running some sort of strange business when you've come in from a community development point of view. It's very odd.
Thank you.
Any
Yeah.
tips? Any tips you would share, Frank, on your experience?
You get a foundation under the wings, right, that wants it continue. Yeah.
Other questions, comments, observations? The floor is open.
Jill, you had a question.
I did. You kind of answered this a bit, but wondering if you could elaborate. What are the biggest barriers that local councils face when using livability indicators to prioritize investments? That's the first part of my question. And then secondly, do you track how interventions lead to improved health equity outcomes?
This is part of that resourcing. I'll start with the second bit, Jill. The resourcing issue for us is part of the difficulty. Like I said, we're so busy just doing, to go back and to kind of get to impact is really difficult to understand what happened, how did you use it. We do have a community of practice, which is really lovely, where we can go in and we talk with our partners, we learn from each other. And I guess that's from partner to partner. And it's also from us to hear from partners as well in terms of what's needed, what are those challenges. Again, we sort of do that on a quarterly basis and try and talk to people. We may ask guest speakers to come in at different times as well. I think for them, one of the greatest challenges is about having an environment that supports the work. And that's from an organizational point of view. And I don't think this is different anywhere in any organization. It's really about that relationship building. It's about that context that you're working within. And for them, if they can gain support at that higher level, at the council or that municipal level, the executive level, if they have people who support the work, it really helps them to do their work as well. And they're all, like other places, under budgetary constraints. So they're making decisions based on what's most important for them. If they're in an environment that doesn't support that kind of process of engaging the community in decision making, it's challenging for them. But I'm sure everybody can appreciate it's really budgetary challenge is one of the greatest problems for them, and then that authorizing environment.
Thank you. This is a fantastic presentation, especially relevant for those that work, as you say, in those academic silos to see how it can translate to real policy making. So thank you so much again.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity.
Susan, do you have any comments?
Well, I just wanted to say how fascinating this practitioner series has been. And Melanie has taken us all the way to a complete national approach to well-being and measurement. And it's so exciting to see. And I really appreciate you sharing about some of the challenges as well. And particularly the concept of health in all policies. And we also work in that vein. And I was just wondering, we asked you about some of the challenges given that kind of different approach and seeing the possibilities in everything. Who's been your best champion?
Yeah, that's a great. I think there's probably been a number of people in different places, and I'm sure you can appreciate that feeling, Susan, when you find that person that gets what you're trying to do. They just get it, and it's just it feels like a beautiful rhythm whereby you're just actually working together for this greater good kind of feeling. You're actually trying to do something beyond your work. And those pieces, like a real partnership, when two things come together, you can see you're learning from each other. They're telling you, you can see that they're using it. I think there is this need for research to be useful. All this money goes into research, and it's very focused on creating publications that nobody might see. So to see that you can do something, you've created something, you've learned something, you've shaped something that is useful in the world, I think that for me is finding that person who goes, yes, that's what I want, or delivering on something when someone's told you, this is what we really need, and you're able to deliver on it. To me, it's just that ability to find those people, and they are our partners. There's not a single partner of the project that doesn't get it. It's just finding them can be hard work.
Nice. Thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead, Sherilyn.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. I mean, I think it's that point where you were just saying about how do you find those partners, and that's what I'm wondering about. I work in a rural LGA in Tasmania, and we just got a big grant to try to make our town more livable. And I was in academia, and I applaud you for staying. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And but now being on the other side and trying to help guide policy and to work with that, I don't know where to go. Like I just happened among this, and it's so amazing. And I'm like, are you hitting the LGAs? Are you letting people know you're there? I mean, if I need to spend some time learning about your site, but I'm rural, and this is very urban, but I also understand AI, remote sensing, and your data and census data. So there's no reason you can't expand it. There's no reason to not be able to do that. And we have a lot of data that would be really useful. So I'm just curious. I really like the question on how are you getting out there and how do people know? And second, if I were to go down this path, how long do you have funding? Because I can't have you disappear after I have to it takes, you have to get the counselors, and there's election this year. I have to get the CEO. I've got to get everyone on board. And it seems to take longer than actually institutes are there. So by the time I get there, what are we doing? So I guess, kudos to you. I mean, this is amazing. And two, oh my God, I would love to play with your data. But yeah, like how would we be able to work together? And could I guarantee that you'd be there?
Absolutely. And, follow up, Sherilyn, afterwards, right? It's so amazing to think, right? I thought, oh, you're going to be some rural LGA in America, but no, here you are in Tasmania, right? And that's great. I've got good contacts in Tasmania, even in the local government association. I've got colleagues at University of Tasmania. We have been doing work on walkability in rural cities, like the smallest rural cities on walkability. So, okay, there's lots I can share on that.
Okay.
How do we get out there? And that is... This is the tough bit, right? Is how do you get out there? So it is really about word of mouth. Again, if you've come into something, look at marketing in this world. Joe, maybe I should be talking to you to learn more about this. But, doing this and trying to understand and getting the message out when you're a small team, when you're focused on doing the work and so on. So, of course, we could always be doing that better. I'm also not the person that loves to be the front face and your head all over everything. It's not the reason I came here. But yes, we do it slowly by contacts, by connections. And you know how anything works in this space, that often people know people who know people, but it can be challenging. We can do small area work. We could expand over all the cities of Australia with resource. So, unfortunately, Frank, it's so tough. We do have support from a philanthropy and a 5-year project from philanthropy, but these are projects. Nobody really wants to fund an initiative like that here. So it's challenging. It's really through research that we can go to philanthropy. We don't get support for the overarching, because who wants to fund the development of data? Right. And that's effectively what we're doing, is we're creating data sets before we create indicators. But we can do this for any of these areas. so that expansion is not a problem. It just is about resourcing to do it. So finding ways to make it happen. But Sharon, let's talk offline, because I'll send you information. You can get in, anyone can log into our portal anywhere on the world and start looking at the livability maps. So just create an account, Sherilyn, and go in and play today, and you can see what's there.
Thank you. It is hard doing public good, right? I mean, that's the thing that government's supposed to be supporting. So good on you for doing it anyway. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, well, with that, we will say thank you to Professor Melanie Davern for this incredible workshop. We appreciate your time, your effort.
Thank you very much, Jill. And thank you to all of you for coming and for listening and for your questions and interest. Wonderful opportunity and great to see this from the Quality of Life Society. So thanks, ISQOLS, too.